This is the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety's Disaster Discussions podcast, where we explore the intersection of weather and the built environment. On September 16, 2020, Category 2 Hurricane Sally made landfall in Gulf Shores, Alabama, with maximum sustained winds of 105 miles per hour. The storm was moving only 5 miles per hour at the time of landfall, resulting in a long duration of tropical storm and hurricane-force winds, as well as storm surge and 20 to 30 inches of rainfall that fell across both coastal and inland portions of Alabama, the western Florida Panhandle, and into Georgia, resulting in $8.8 billion in damages, according to NOAA. The National Weather Service office in Mobile says that wind damage was extensive across the region, especially in areas that experienced Sally's eye wall for several hours, with southeast Mobile County and Baldwin County, Alabama and Escambia County, Florida, bearing the brunt of prolonged hurricane conditions with wind gusts over 100 miles per hour. What's unique about Hurricane Sally, though, is that it struck the highest concentration of fortified roofs in the country. Of the 53,000 fortified homes in Alabama, most of those are located in Mobile and Baldwin counties, where about 1 out of every 5 single-family homes is built to the fortified standard. IBHS's voluntary Beyond Code science-backed construction standard, developed here for both new construction and re-roofing. While we've seen the success of fortified proven in modeling, lab testing, and previous post-event investigations, Hurricane Sally provided the first opportunity to conduct a peer-reviewed study measuring and documenting the performance of fortified homes and comparing the results against standard construction and code homes using a large sample size of insurance claims data. In this episode of Disaster Discussions, we are diving deep into the data from a report to discuss the results of this peer-reviewed study. So joining me now, we have Mark Fowler, Commissioner of Insurance for the state of Alabama, and Dr. Lawrence Powell from the University of Alabama's Center for Risk and Insurance Research. Both of those organizations partners on this report. So Lars, welcome to the podcast, and Mark, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm glad to be here and glad to talk about Fortified.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we could bring together a University of Alabama employee and a big Auburn fan for the sake of talking about resilient homes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we like to talk Fortified, and we do it all the time. We've put a high priority on that here in Alabama, as you can tell, and we've been doing it quite a while. So we're glad to do that, and we were happy to have the opportunity that we saw in front of us to do a study after Hurricane Sally. So thank you for having us on today.
Yeah, we're going to jump all into that study today, but I know we've had you on the podcast before, Mark. Lars, I think this is your first time on our podcast. I'd love to hear just a little bit about both of your backgrounds before we get started.
Lars, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Lars Powell. I'm at the University of Alabama. Early in my career, I was an insurance agent and claim adjuster. Went to school and got a PhD in risk and insurance at University of Georgia. So I have made a circuit of the SEC, at least professionally, and worked as a professor for 15 years and then came to University of Alabama to run this Center for Risk and Insurance Research. It was a great opportunity and really fascinating work where you look back over what you've done with your life, and it's the first thing I've done for a living where I feel like I've really helped anybody. When people ask what I do, I say, well, I study things like fortified and resilience and how to how to fix insurance problems and risk problems. So it's been a lot of fun. Had great people to work with at the Department of Insurance in Alabama, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, in my case, it didn't start with insurance. I always joke that when I finished up at Auburn University 40 years ago this month, and I'm reminded constantly it was 40 years ago this month. I always joke that I didn't know how to do anything. So I moved to Washington, D.C., where I thought I'd be in really good company. Nobody up there knows how to do anything. So I thought I would do fine in a place like that. I moved to Washington with 2 interviews. It's 3 days after graduation, packed the car, 2 interviews and a month's paid on a boarding house on Capitol Hill, and became one of the hill rats up there. Young people working in Washington, barely able to afford a street vendor hot dog, but I handled defense issues for a senator. And so we're working out multi-billion-dollar programs, and I'm eating at street vendor hot dogs because that's all I could afford. But I eventually went to work as a lobbyist in Washington for a major defense contractor, and found my way back home not long after that, and worked in the governmental affairs arena and association arena, representing industries such as chemical manufacturers, and because they just didn't have a strong enough public presence, I thought people hated them. I'd go to somebody people hated more, and that was cable TV. And so I represented cable TV for a while in the state of Alabama at the Alabama Cable TV Association, and eventually found myself at the Department of Insurance. A good friend of mine had been there that I'd known for decades and left, and I called him and said, who's doing your job at the Department of Insurance? And he said, nobody. He said, you're interested? And I said, absolutely. And I thought I'd be a good fit there, and I thought that would fit me too, and I would enjoy it. I had a chance to go to work for, and then when I went there, when I came to the department, that was in 2013, in February of 2013, and it was really just had a number of administrative duties, but also primarily handled our legislative program, and I worked in that for a number of years, and continued to I was working for an icon of insurance consumers, Jim Ridling, and I had the great privilege of having a running conversation, working as his deputy and chief of staff for 9.5 years, and so I can only mess it up from here. And when Commissioner Ridling decided to retire, Governor Ivey asked me to step in this role as commissioner, and it has been the greatest experience of my life, without question. I always thought that job all those years ago in the United States Senate was the best job I'd ever had, until I came to the Department of Insurance, and working with some of the finest professionals I've ever been around in my life here every day. It's been a great experience. And folks that are a part of, so we can consider part of our team that may not officially be a part of the department, folks like Lars Powell here at the Center for Risk and Insurance Research that we get to work with as well. I remember when Lars came on board. And I've had the great privilege of being here long enough to see this program, our Fortified program, we call Strengthen Alabama Homes, go from idea to national model. And that's been an amazing privilege. And it's been the honor of a lifetime to be able to sit in this seat and follow someone like Jim Ridling. I can't tell you how beloved and how great he was as a commissioner, all the great things he did for the people of Alabama while he was here. And Strengthen Alabama Homes and Fortified came from him. It came from a lot of different people who working together. I mean, hundreds of people working together and stakeholders pulling the wagons together. But it really all started with Jim Ridling after Hurricanes Ivan and Katrina. Was in Alabama he was in Alabama. He's a retired insurance executive. He was the CEO of all U.S. operations for Fireman's Fund, and he trying to at the request of Governor Bob Riley, went down to the coast after Hurricanes Ivan and Katrina to try to calm the waters. And he said, you're not going to do anything about insurance rates until you change the economics of what happens after the storm hits, which means have less damage. And all the ripple effect and the dominoes of progress and positive change that come from that when you have less damage. And so when he became commissioner, he had an opportunity to act on that. And with the help and cooperation of a lot of people working together down on the coast and in state government all the way up to the governor, created the Strengthen Alabama Homes program. It passed the legislature in 2012. The year before that, the Department of Insurance, along with all those same industry support and all those same stakeholders, created the wind mitigation discounts And we made the first grant in 2016, and we've been churning and burning ever since. And when Hurricane Sally came over, that gave us an opportunity to really take a look at how the fortified roofs really worked. And that's where Lars Powell comes into play. Lars had been working with us a great deal and doing amazing work for us at the University of Alabama. So we knew when we really wanted to study this, we reached out to Lars and we created the data call that that our employees here at the Department of Insurance collected. We turned it over to Lars, and the report was written, and Lars did a great job with it. So there you go. That's the story, and we're sticking to it.
Yeah, that is the story. And just to give our listeners here just a little bit more background. Yeah, you mentioned that Strengthen Alabama Homes passed in 2012, first grants issued in 2016. To date, $86 million in grants issued, more than 8,700 fortified homes retrofitted with some of that grant money. You talked about seeing the success of the program. Certainly awesome. So for those who haven't read the report yet, it is available on IBHS.org. And the name of the report is The Performance of IBHS Fortified Home Construction in Hurricane Sally. You mentioned former Commissioner Ridling, that quote at the beginning of the report. So I encourage everyone to kind of read that introduction, that letter about really how everything got started in Alabama. You talked a lot about those benchmark insurance discounts and those endorsements that insurers in Alabama provide for homeowners to upgrade to fortified roofs. So Mark, before we dive into the report, I want to talk about, 20 years after this program really got started, 1 in 5 of those homes down in Mobile and Baldwin County are now fortified. You talked about the success of seeing the program grow. What would you like to see as we look ahead to the next 20 years in Alabama?
Well, Rachel, let me update your numbers. We're over 9,200 right now from the grant program at over $91 million.
Awesome.
And we're tracking along right now to cross over $100 million before the end of the calendar year. I hope we're going to do that. And that's not certain, but we're going to do that. We're tracking that way right now. And so I hope that's going to be the conclusion. It's amazing. But I think one of the things we didn't anticipate when we first started this program was the demand for them. It's tremendous demand. I remember we talk about a story about when we made grants at the end of a year. We do them quarterly, and we had about 350 grants at the end of a year, calendar year, a couple of years ago. And we raised the window at midnight for people to go onto the website. We had 200,000 people sitting on the website waiting for those 350 grants.
Wow.
And they went in like 8 minutes, which we always joke that Taylor Swift and Ticketmaster's got nothing on Strengthen Alabama Homes. So what we really have hoped for all along, we've seen come about, is we never wanted Strengthen Alabama Homes to be the way everybody got their fortified roof. We wanted building codes to be passed, strong IBHS, strong building codes to pass, and we've got that in much of Baldwin County, in a good deal of Mobile County, but not as much as Baldwin. And we wanted the private sector to really take over and take this. We probably are going to continue to make grants for the foreseeable future through the Strengthen Alabama Homes program. But we really wanted the private sector to take over and folks to be re-roofing their home and to the IBHS standards, and new builds be built to IBHS standards. And we're seeing a lot of that in the coastal counties, but we have a long way to go in the rest of the state. So our work is way ahead of us. We're going to continue to promote fortified. We're going to continue to adapt new technologies. We love the fact that a lot of states around the country are modeling their programs after Strengthen Alabama Homes, because those states are going to find ways to improve it and do it better and adapt it as they adapt it to their own states. And as we watch those innovations and those improvements, we're going to start copying them. So we like seeing that, because this program is a great example of what the founders of our country said when they said the states will be the laboratory of policy development. And this program has nothing to do with the politics of the country or politics of our state. It's doing something good for the people of our state. And other states have recognized that and creating their own programs as well and adapting it to their state and making it even better. So we hope that process will continue on out for the foreseeable future.
Definitely. And Lars, I want to bring you in a bit to kind of set up this study. Hurricane Sally in 2020. We've seen other storms strike areas where there were some fortified properties, but this was a critical mass of fortified properties, huge number. So tell me a little bit about the importance of assessing a real world event, of this magnitude. Kind of tell me about the audience you were targeting that would be able to use the results of this study, and then get into that data sample a little bit. You guys did this data call for policies and claims that were in the affected area, partnering together. So tell me a little bit about both of those aspects.
Sure. Well, that's a lot to unpack. I'll try to take them one at a time, but if I forget, I'll ask for a clue. The data call. Well, so Hurricane Sally in 2020, we had about 20,000, maybe 17,000 fortified homes in Alabama, and we focused on a specific area that was south of I-10 in our two coastal counties, and then some other data issues. They had to have insurance, and the company had to respond. So we wound up with right around, I want to say, 8,500 fortified houses in our sample of about 40,200 total policies, which is, this is, to back up just a second, for an insurance data nerd, this is about the best thing that can happen to you, is to have somebody like Commissioner Fowler call and say, well, we want to give you all this data, and you even get to help us choose what we're going to ask them. So it was really, had to pinch myself a few times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. But once we got started and the data started to come in, and we got it cleaned up and did those sort of things, that was really exciting. And everyone else is kind of snickering that, this guy thinks it's exciting to get data cleaned up, but I really did. This was a great opportunity. And we were looking specifically at the houses that were in the highest wind speeds of the storm. And we had some partners in this that helped us out with wind speed and rainfall data. Renaissance Re was a huge help. They had some proprietary wind modeling data that showed us how hard the wind was blowing, like 1 kilometer apart. And that was a big help for the study. So why did we want to do it? What was the point? Well, we've still got companies in Alabama, or we did before the study. I think we still might have one or two, but we had companies that weren't willing to underwrite the fortified houses at the coast. And I can understand why you might not want to underwrite some houses at the coast, but the fortified houses, we believe, based on the science, based on laboratory testing, based on the modeling, they would do much better. But a pretty good response to that is we haven't ever seen one in a hurricane. So we saw this opportunity and decided that we couldn't squander it. We've got data on all these houses, or that there's the potential to get data on all these houses and be able to show the differences. And the hope was, and I believe it's been somewhat effective, was to show some of the naysayers that, well, no, this is the whole point of having good leadership in your insurance market is so that the market will behave the way markets should and take information in and make good business decisions. And so I feel like this study was the last piece of that we needed before everything started to fall in place. And at least for those 20% of homes that are fortified, I believe they're having a really easy time getting insurance. And you don't see that anywhere else along the Gulf Coast or the southeastern coast, where you can get insurance from a company that advertises during college football on Saturday, as opposed to some company that you haven't heard of that might be a subsidiary of a company you've heard of. But I think that just speaks volumes about Alabama's market and the trust that has gone both ways between our regulators and our company leaders, that you're not stuck in something. If you're in Alabama, you're just trying to make the thing work.
Absolutely. And just to give people just some kind of numbers from that data sample, you collected data from 86 different companies. You mentioned that original sample size was just over 40,000 single family home policies located south of I-10. About 7,400 were fortified, 8,600 reported claims totaling $181 million in losses, including deductibles. The value is $243 million. $17 billion in total insured value, and about 22% received insurance claim payments with an average claim amount of about $20,000. So, Lars, you were looking to analyze three key performance metrics across three construction categories in this report: claim frequency, claim severity, and loss ratio. And you were looking at fortified roof, fortified gold, and conventional houses. So talk a little bit about those key performance metrics. Why was it important to look at those in particular?
Well, I'm going to take you with me next time I get interviewed on this, because I can never remember all that stuff, and you just rattled it right off. That's impressive. I hope you had it written down. That's not something you should memorize. Anyways, yes, so the three performance measures, the average effects, the average without trees, and the nearest neighbor, well, those are the three models, and the three performance measures were the frequency reduction, severity reduction, and the loss ratio reduction. And all of this is what the insurance companies use when they're pricing insurance. Or these are the metrics by which they measure their performance or measure how well something's working or not working. And so that was, none of this stuff is rocket science. It's just we wanted to get as close to sort of an all else equal scenario as we could using the data that we have. And there's probably 100 more things we could do that might tell us a tiny little bit more. And I promise I'm going to do all of them. But at some point, it gets where you can't really explain it to anybody, and so it doesn't do any good. One of the hard things about a thing like Fortified, and when you're trying to solve a problem in an insurance market, is people have attention spans that are already over. And if you try to explain, well, there's 25 pre-clauses we have to say before we can tell you that you get this reduction or this discount, then everyone's already forgotten what you're talking about and they don't want to talk to you again. And it was important to keep this simple, keep it easy to keep it effective and accurate. So we've got accurate discounts. We collected accurate data, and then we came up with several scenarios that we wanted to measure. And the frequency reduction, severity reduction, and loss ratio reduction. The first two I think are pretty obvious. The frequency is whether there's a loss or not. So the frequency is the count of the number of losses, and then we make that as a ratio of the total number of losses. Severity is the dollar amount paid out, and the loss ratio is the amount paid out divided by the premium that's charged. And so all of these are, I think, pretty obvious metrics for an insurance company, but I think they work just as well for trying to evaluate if this is a good solution for catastrophe insurance.
Yeah, awesome to have that data to actually back this program up, a large amount of data, and we are going to get into some of those results. So you mentioned earlier the analysis looked at three things: simple average performance without tree fall claims, and then the average performance controlling for location and trees. So I want to stop and talk about trees briefly. 46% of the claims were due to falling trees. Tree fall losses contribute heavily to total hurricane damage in any storm. Some of the results from this study include the trees, as we mentioned, others do not. Just an important note, this study, we wanted to look at the efficacy of the Fortified program. And Fortified is not designed to mitigate losses caused by trees falling on houses. So that's an important note. And while insurers did have to pay claims involving trees, today we're really interested in focusing on how well that Fortified construction performs.
Sure. And of course, the trees are very important to the people whose houses they fell on, and they're very important to the insurance companies that had to pay for them. They're much less important to the engineers and meteorologists and such that are trying to make up new loss mitigation techniques and evaluate how well something like Fortified worked for its intended purpose. I think it also raises an issue that, and this has been very contentious throughout the time that I've been involved in these coastal insurance issues, is somebody might say, well, I've got all these healthy, mature oak trees around my house, and if I cut them down, it'll take away some of my protection. And then some people just say, well, yeah, I've got pine trees around my house. I don't want to cut them down because I like them. And those are two very different things. And it's also different when you have a sprinkler system installed in your yard and someone cuts through the roots of those mature oak trees that then are a lot easier to blow over in the wind. So there's just all kinds of things you have to consider. And, nobody wants to pay an insurance premium. Nobody wants to cut down a tree. But I think what we've learned from Sally and a lot of the more recent storms, the ones that have real heavy rainfall and just a little bit of wind, if the ground gets wet, it's going to push over trees. And what you really don't want is a tree falling on your house. You can be injured or killed by it, but more than that, it's just if everybody's got a tree on their house, it's going to be a few weeks before yours gets cut up and removed, unless you're really lucky. There's only so many people with chainsaws in every town, and I watched people wait on those services in Hurricane Helene, and it was really disappointing to see that some people couldn't get in and out of their houses. So yeah, we need to think about this, and it's really something that's expensive to deal with on the back end. When your house is 40 years old and a tree's been growing next to it for 40 years, that's a lot different than when you see a tree start to grow and you could just run over it with your lawnmower or something. So going forward, I think there needs to be some consumer education about that, and understand that, yes, it's great to have trees on your property. They block the wind, but you don't want them to be tall enough to fall over and hit your house. They need to be further away from your house than they are tall. And remember, they're going to grow. They don't just stay the size they are. And it seems like I'm on a soapbox preaching about this, because I am. It's one of the things that we've learned, that there's very little we can do about it after the fact. So you can have an arborist come out and check on your trees, or you can cut them down, or you can not plant them in the first place.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that regular maintenance of trees ahead of hurricane season, and that certainly goes a long way in kind of minimizing your risk as much as you can when it comes to the trees.
Hey there, Dr. Ann Cope, Chief Engineer for IBHS. What is the best roof? That's a question we get asked a lot here at IBHS, and the answer is complicated because it depends a lot on where you live. Roofs should stand up to everyday thunderstorms and limit the damage from oncoming hurricanes. With our Roofing Roadmap strategic initiative, we're making the IBHS science about weather and roof performance available for you. Visit ibhs.org/roofing roadmaps and take our Roof 101 course right now to learn about asphalt shingles, America's most popular roof cover. How well does your shingle roof stand up to wind and hail? What do you need to know about roofs? Get the science at your fingertips today, ibhs.org.
Getting into some of the results, you looked at average performance without tree fall claims, and then average performance controlling for trees and the location using wind speed and rainfall data. So we know that wind speeds and rainfall, of course, change as those storms move inland. It's important to control for the location using some of that weather data to find out the strength and duration of the winds that these homes experience, so that we're kind of comparing them accurately. So tell me a little bit about that, and a little bit about how you kind of control for the wind and rain aspect.
Sure. We did this two ways, and I think the way that's most effective. Yeah. So we looked at the claims data with and without the tree fall claims, but then we had geolocated every house, and which took a little bit of elbow grease, but we got the exact coordinates of each house. And so then for every fortified house, we found the closest conventional house and compared the damage ratio, which is you sum up all the losses that were paid and divide by the sum of all of the coverage limits that they have. And my understanding is that's what the insurance companies and the actuaries that work for them use when they're trying to evaluate how homes and policies perform during a storm. And so, yeah, being able to, it's like the best control you can have is two houses right next to each other that are otherwise identical, because you know that, and we limited that to be, I think, within a quarter of a mile. So you're not going to be more than a quarter of a mile away. And if you didn't have, for any fortified house that there wasn't a conventional house within a quarter mile, we just dropped those from our database or from the sample for that specific test. So you know that they're facing the same weather conditions. And then we can do those same three comparisons of the frequency, severity, and loss ratio reduction.
Right. So you want to make sure that if there's a conventional house that experienced 70 mile per hour winds, that there was also a fortified house within a quarter mile that also experienced the same wind speeds, to do that kind of a fair comparison. So looking at some of those results, claim frequency reduction, 73% for roof, 76% for gold, claim severity reduction, 15% for roof, 24% for gold. And then loss ratio reduction, 72% for roof and 67% for gold. So what this tells us that it's clear fortified roof and gold houses, they suffered less damage than conventional houses. Is that correct?
Yes. Obviously, there's something going on here that didn't set right with people when we first let this out. Why is the roof doing better than the gold? Well, that's why we had to do the nearest neighbor comparison. Is the average roof, the average fortified gold house is 2 miles closer to the coast than the average fortified roof house, which makes a lot of sense. You've got a much stronger incentive to build gold if you're right on the coast. Also, there's not a lot of trees on the beach, so you didn't have a lot of tree fall claims. So again, those became somewhat irrelevant. But one thing we did see when we looked across wind speeds is that the gold homes, the gold fortified did outperform the fortified roof once we got over a wind speed of about 95 knots, which is 100 and something miles an hour, which is exactly where the laboratory tests and the models suggest that you would start seeing a difference between them, that the structural damage can start occurring as opposed to the shingles coming off and water pouring in the house. So that was very encouraging, because for other locations and other perils, we have to depend on the models.
Exactly. You would expect those, those strongest houses to be located in locations that experience strongest winds from hurricanes, like the eye of hurricanes as they come ashore. So let's talk about some of the alternative scenarios, kind of imagining if the 25,000 or so conventional houses in the sample, if they had been built or retrofitted to fortified roof or the gold standard. There's some pretty striking results in this report. You talk about policyholders paying $53 million in deductibles. We could have saved $32 million, though, had all those homes in the sample been built to the fortified standard. If they had all been built to fortified roof, we would have saved about 61% of that money. Insurers paid $149 million for claims, but could have saved 67% in losses, which comes out to $100 million. And if all the houses had been built to fortified gold, policyholders could have saved $34 million or 65% in deductibles paid, and insurers could have saved 75% of the total claims paid. That's huge amounts for insurers, huge amounts for homeowners as well. It sounds like it's a win-win for both sides on those stats.
Yeah, I like to say that these alternative scenarios, that the other ways this could have turned out, that's what it would have looked like if Jim Ridling and Mark Fowler would have been insurance commissioners back in the 60s instead of in the 2010s. We could have already, you've got some amount of the housing supply, the housing stock that turns over every year. About 2% of houses have their roof replaced every year just naturally. And you can only do so many Strengthen Alabama Homes grants, and the rest of them, we hope people do the right thing when they put a new roof on their house. And we're starting to see a lot more of that than we did certainly a decade and a half ago. So yes, if this is showing the world we could live in, if now that we've made these decisions, we stick to them, we follow the science, I'm sure the technology will get better. I had a call day before yesterday with some engineers from Owens Corning wanting to get some information about this so they could figure out what went wrong with their shingles, or if there's a problem with their shingles, how do they make them better? And they wanted to narrow down, okay, which of these houses had new shingles versus old shingles. So I was really excited about that. to know that there's some really smart people out there trying to figure out. I had been wondering why we put shingles on houses, because it just seems like they fall off in storms. But maybe we could make some better shingles, or a metal roof, or a tile roof, or a concrete roof, just something that's not going to wear out in 10 years and then turn your house into a bucket during a storm where it fills up with water. And that's the future that we have in front of us. Is a hurricane comes through and maybe the power goes out for a few days, and a few houses have some damage if they haven't managed their trees well. And other than that, the power comes back on. You clean up some debris out of your yard and go back to doing what you were doing before. Hopefully, go into the store, go into restaurants to stimulate the economy, taking your kids to do things and whatnot. And then you say, oh wow, we had a hurricane. That's kind of like, oh wow, we had a bad rainstorm and nobody went out for a few days. It's not. I mean, still, it's going to be a dangerous thing. You don't want to be here when it happens. Fortified is not a license to stay home when there's an evacuation, but it's really great to come back from an evacuation and there's your house looking fine. Maybe some debris in the yard. If your neighbor's house isn't fortified, then maybe part of their stuff sitting in your yard, and you help them clean it up.
Yeah. Historically, hurricanes have been, major roadblocks, but I think what we're aiming for is making hurricanes, more of just a bump in the road, like you mentioned, getting people back to their lives and kind of changing gears in the local economy and what people are spending their money on after one of these storms hits. Less on their house, and like you mentioned, maybe more on some other things. So a really interesting scenario to think about Alabama's potential future. So I do want to talk about some of the other results in the study. You also compared fortified homes that were, you compared them to homes that were built to the local building code. And as both of you mentioned earlier, the building code in Baldwin County and in coastal Mobile County is one of the stronger building codes in the country, actually. The Coastal Construction Code Supplement, those houses built on the coast are built to a very strong code. So you look at a little over 5,000 policies written on houses that were built or re-roofed to building code equivalent to the fortified standards, that code there I mentioned. But what's different about these houses is that with local codes, they're not necessarily evaluated or inspected to the level that fortified homes are evaluated and inspected to. So you kind of wanted to compare fortified roof and fortified gold to what you in the report call code roof and code gold, so non-fortified houses using that nearest neighbor method without tree claims. So the results show that fortified roof houses outperformed the code roof houses, and fortified gold performed about the same as code gold. So talk a little bit about this aspect of the report.
Right. Yeah, so once we get rid of the tree claims and do the nearest neighbor, then we do find that the code, the houses built to the gold standard and then tested by building code officials or evaluated by building code officials as opposed to the fortified evaluators, that we can't tell a statistical difference. There's some small differences, but they're not statistically significant. But when you compare the fortified roof to the code roof, the code roof is closer to being conventional construction performance than to fortified roof performance. And so there's got to be something missing. And before we accuse anyone of not doing their job or anything like that, there's some more robustness testing we need to do. It may be that it took a while for the roof code inspectors to climb that learning curve and understand everything that's required for the fortified roof. It could be that the inspection system for a roof is not sufficient. I mean, there's a certain number of looks that the evaluator has to take at the roof. And I know that what the IBHS does is the contractor takes pictures that demonstrate the nailing pattern, and they've got the secondary water barrier and things like that on the roof, and maybe they're not doing the same thing with code. Of course, our hope is that all of the houses are built to the fortified designation and get that evaluation, because that's how they get the discount on their insurance. But to those that didn't, and I think those are becoming more and more rare, but to those that didn't get those, that didn't get the fortified designation because they didn't have the more comprehensive evaluation, it just shows that evaluation is important. And we've all heard the story about the code inspector that never gets out of the truck if it's too hot or if it's too cold or if it's too medium, that they are not, if somebody's not doing their job, that needs to be addressed. But if it's the fact that the process isn't right, then we need to address the process, or, hey, let's just have everybody get a fortified house.
Yeah, I think the important takeaway here is, we have this saying at IBHS, you get what you inspect, not what you expect. It's just making sure things are done right, whether it's a code home, a conventional home, or a fortified home, making sure that, the plan is being carried through, whatever that plan is, and that things are being done correctly.
Rachel, I think I want to steal that. Is that okay if I do that, please? That's a great saying.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so great takeaways there, comparing fortified to code roof and code gold from that report. So looking at all these conclusions, and there's a lot more things you guys dived into the report. I've gotten the chance to read the whole thing a couple of times now. Really interesting information. I don't know much about insurance terms like loss ratio, reduction, all that, but I've gotten to learn about some of that here. But I think the takeaway is obviously we can translate to substantial financial savings is one of the takeaways by building to the fortified standard. And obviously there's some issues to deal with surrounding trees. We talked about that, but huge amounts of money that can be saved by insurers and homeowners. So really positive results from this report.
We can't stop wildfire, but there is a pathway to better protect your home. I'm Steve Hawk, Senior Director for Wildfire at IBHS. If you live in areas at risk of wildfire, consider building or retrofitting your home using our Wildfire Prepared Home standard. It addresses ways you can make your home more resilient to wildfire by creating a 5-foot non-combustible zone and preparing your home's exterior to help break the pathways of fire spread. Visit wildfireprepared.org to learn how to protect your home and apply for a Wildfire Prepared Home designation.
The cost to build a fortified gold house, our volume builders tell us that it's less than 1% of the total cost of construction to do fortified gold from the ground up, and something like 3 to 5% for the roof when you're re-roofing. So it's very modest cost and a huge return on your investment. Pays back very quickly. What do we call it? We say don't goof when you re-roof. That to not do the fortified is really a mistake, because you put this roof on, you hope it lasts another 20 to 40 years, but that's 20 to 40 years without that extra protection from a hurricane or a strong convective storm.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hone in more on that cost that you did mention in the report, just so we can talk about that a little bit more. To build to fortified over the International Residential Code, in most areas, you list 0.5% to 3% for new construction of fortified gold, an additional 6 to 16% to retrofit existing homes to fortified roof. But you do point out, as the IRC continues to move closer to the elements that are in fortified, that cost differential is going to continue getting smaller with time. And then you mentioned, on average, buyers pay about 7% more for fortified houses than for an identical house without the fortified designation. So there is some cost difference, but like you've highlighted today with these statistics, a sound investment overall, it sounds like.
Indeed. And where that 7% comes from, we found it by comparing the sale prices of conventional homes and fortified homes, but you can also back it out based on if you take the insurance savings for the average house, it over the course of a 30-year mortgage, that the present value of that comes to about 7% of the home price. So what it is people seeing, it's a fortified home, and over the period of time that I'm going to be paying for that house, I'm going to pay 7% less than I would be paying if it weren't fortified. So it's not a surprise to learn that, yes, once you get really close to the coast, that's more like 15 to 20% is what the coastal real estate agents tell us. And they say it's because you save so much money on insurance, and you also have that peace of mind.
Right. The report highlights 20% discount for fortified roof for roofs 5 years or older, but 35% discount for roofs less than 5 years old. That's a substantial insurance discount for folks living in these coastal areas.
It's interesting. Lars made a great reference there about the real estate, and you as well, Rachel. It was shortly after we started this program, real estate, the realtors and the professional realtors down in our coastal counties recognized the economic benefits here, and they started including it in the local MLS listings as whether or not a house was fortified in Mobile and Baldwin County. So in those two counties, at least, there's a box to check for fortified, whether a house is fortified or not, because they realize the benefit of the fortified roof economically in terms of sale value and the whole bit. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, what are your thoughts now that you've gotten to see this full report laid out, all the data that you guys helped collect for Lars to kind of analyze? What are your thoughts on this report?
Well, we couldn't be more excited about it. It validated all that we thought it would, and it came out even better than we thought it would. We had been hearing that the fortified roofs performed as advertised after Hurricane Sally, but a lot of that we were hearing it from the companies, and it was proprietary information, and we had to figure out how to get that out there. And so that's when, sitting around a table with Lars and some of our folks here at the department, we decided to do the data call and just do a report on our own. And we work with the industry who supports fortified tremendously. And it was a collaborative effort from the beginning to get that out, because we were asking them what can we use, and they're telling us none of this, and so we said, well, we've got to figure out a way to do this, and so we came up with the idea of the data call and work with those same companies that were reporting to us that they were getting great results back from the feedback and good data back on the fortified roofs. And so having Lars and the Center for Risk Insurance Research here with us that we work with so closely already was a great benefit to us. And what we learned, what we've been saying, true in empirical data now, fortified works. And that's what this whole thing boils down to, fortified works. And all the benefits that come from that. You heard that just in some of Lars's presentation here about all the economic benefits and the collateral benefits that come in so many areas. This less damage, means people can go to work. Less damage means kids can go to school. Less damage means the municipality has less to clean up. And it's all those kind of things. I heard someone say, a former EMA director here in Alabama, say a present employee or prepared employee is a present employee, is how he said it. That means if you're prepared and when the storm comes because you fortified, you can go to work, because more than likely you're not going to have the damage that would mean you'd have to be displaced. And so we, with this report, we now have real live, a true scientific report, empirical data to back up all that we've been saying all this time. And we couldn't be more pleased with how it came out.
And you guys mentioned some of the insurers that were still reluctant to write policies in this area. Have you gotten any response from some of those folks? And what do you think this will do for competition as far as the insurance industry in Alabama? Do you think it will continue to help?
All of that helps. All of this together, the combination effect of all of this means a more stable economy and a more stable market in this area. And I think other states are recognizing that. And that's why they're looking at having their own version of Strengthen Alabama Homes, or their own fortified program in some way. And some of the states are way far advanced on this. My Safe Homes in Florida, and Louisiana is churning and burning with this now. Oklahoma has a great program up there, and Kentucky, and so many other states that are. And my compliments to those commissioners and those departments and those states for recognizing the benefit of this. And it's great to be a part of this happening in our state right now.
And Lars, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned you were a bit of a data nerd, and this was about as good as it could get as far as the data. Do you have another? Well, I guess, is there more you want to do with this data set? And what's your next data set you're eyeing? Would you do this again with another storm? Is there anything further or different that you would want to analyze when it comes to fortified, or is this as good as it gets as far as what you'd like to do?
Well, we hope there's never another storm, but we know that's not going to be the case, and it's. I wish it weren't, but it is an effort for me when a hurricane's coming in. I get a little bit giddy. What if we could get some more data on this? But of course, we'd rather the loss not happen. But that's not the world we live in. I've made it clear to Commissioner Fowler and to commissioners across the country that if they're unfortunate to have a loss, once they've put up some loss mitigation features, there's nothing I would enjoy more than helping them determine how it performed using a data call and being able to figure out what's going on in their market.
Rachel, this isn't rocket science. If it was, I wouldn't be here. This is prepare in advance, fortify, strengthen yourself. This is why athletes do what they do, prepare for the game. This is why we do. We quote Jim Riddling a lot. In all this with what he said about the economics of what happens after the storm hits. And it's in the report, the quote. The part of that we rarely ever say is what he said right immediately before that. He said, the storms are going to come. There's nothing we can do about that. So we have to prepare in advance. And that's when he said, you're not going to do anything about insurance rates until you change the economics of what happens after the storm hits. We rarely quote that first part, but that first part is what Lars just said, which is so true. There's nothing we can do about it. The storms are going to come, and the difference is in how we prepare for them. And if we prepared in advance for them, we can survive better on the after that. That's not to say you're not going to have damage, even with a fortified roof, because it may be something we didn't think about, or it may just be because of what happened in the situation at the moment when the storm hit. We didn't anticipate so many of the claims would be because trees fell on their homes. So now we know this, and now we can apply that. We can apply that knowledge for the next time. So this report is, I hope, going to be the first in a long series of reports on fortified. After these storms come and after these events happen, these severe convective storms are just going to come, and we have to be ready for them. And this report verifies all that we have believed to be true from laboratory research, at great research at the IBHS, and smaller storms. But now we know when the real thing does come, fortified works.
Absolutely. All right. Mark Fowler, Commissioner of Insurance for the state of Alabama, and Dr. Lars Powell from the University of Alabama's Center for Risk and Insurance Research. Thank you both for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Rachel. Glad to be here.
Been a pleasure.
All right, and you can check out that full report at IBHS.org. This has been Disaster Discussions. Hurricane Sally takes aim at Alabama, analyzing fortified performance proof points.
Thanks for listening to the Disaster Discussions podcast. Join us next month for a new episode. For more on IBHS's ongoing research efforts, visit IBHS.org.